Hi, everybody. Thanks for your patience. We were trying to get a little bit of video audio situation going. May or may not have been successful, but it's going to be a great talk no matter what. I'm Katerina Audley, and I'm with the Noyo Center for Marine Science. And I'm here also, we've got Sheila Siemens, our executive director, and our guest today is Lisa Ballance from Oregon State University. Lisa is the director of the Marine Mammal Institute at Oregon State University, and she is an expert in all sorts of things. The thing that Lisa's going to be talking about with us tonight is beaked whales, and in particular, Hub's beaked whales. We're very lucky. We're about to kick off next week on September 15th an articulation of a Hub's beaked whale. And only a few dozen of these animals have ever been seen, and one washed up on our beach a couple of years ago. And it took some DNA samples being sent around the world to even identify this mysterious species. So we're about to articulate this incredibly fascinating and rare species over at the Noyo Center. We'll be having a few open houses on Thursday, September 18th, and then on Saturday, September 20th. If you don't get our newsletter, you can find out all the details there. We'll also be having open hours for everybody to stop by who wants to see science in action and the progress that we're making every day from September 15th until 20th from 1 to 4 p.m. So I'll remind you about all of that at the end once we're all as madly fascinated with beaked whales as we are already. For now, I want to turn this over to Lisa. So yes, as I said, Lisa's the director of the Marine Mammal Institute at Oregon State University, and she has done all kinds of fascinating work around the world. But she today is going to share with us some information about encounters that she and her research team had with the Hub's beaked whales. That's one of my favorite science field science stories ever, pretty much, and teach us a whole bunch about beaked whales. So here you go. Thanks, Lisa, for being here. And by the way, we appreciate if any of you are able to support this talk with a donation to the Noyo Center. We count on you for your donation. So if you're able to support this program by making a donation of $10 or more, we would be incredibly grateful for your support to help make all of this cool stuff happen. Thanks again. Okay. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. And I'm going to begin by sharing my screen. Thanks so much for the introduction and for the invitation to speak with you this evening. It is a huge pleasure for me to have the opportunity to tell this group about one of our recent research expeditions. And you'll see why in a little while, why I characterize it as a high risk, high reward project. It revealed a mystery whale off of our very own Oregon coast. It's a fascinating story about a very poorly known group of whales that still remain among the least known vertebrates on the planet. Before I dive in to this story, I do want to give you a very brief orientation to my own professional home, Oregon State University, because a lot of my story depends on the people and the resources that are here. So I am the director of Oregon State University's Marine Mammal Institute. It's located in Newport, Oregon, on the coast, Central Oregon, at the Hatfield Marine Science Center. Our mission is to integrate research, graduate education, and outreach to advance our knowledge of marine mammals, to train the next generation of professionals, and to engage with stakeholders to ensure that these animals and their ecosystems are always healthy. Essentially, everything we do here is guided by our principles and goals. Those are scientific rigor, basic research with strong links to real-world applications, community engagement, and real-world impacts that range from local to national to global scales. We are 8 professors and labs with expertise in complementary disciplines that are all related to marine mammals. And those disciplines include satellite tracking technology, molecular genetics, ecology, health, and space use overlap with humans, marine mammal ecosystem interactions, behavioral ecology, passive acoustics, drone excellence, and marine mammal stranding response. We also have 13 additional principal investigators, 18 research, seagoing, and administrative staff, and close to 30 postdoctorates and graduate students. Collectively, we are 60 strong and growing. Now, without a doubt, we do cool science. And what I'd like to do right now is take you into the field with me for 2 minutes virtually to show you some snippets of what we do. This is a video clip that has audio in the background. That's why we're a little bit late getting started. I don't know that the audio will come through, but I'm going to launch into the video right now, and I'll come back with you in 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm back. And with that preface, I want to return to the main story for tonight, which is a mystery beaked whale in Oregon waters. When we think of whales, many of us think of animals like this one. This is a blue whale, the largest animal ever to have lived on the planet. Blue whales are increasing in numbers along the west coast of North America, including right here off Oregon. And in this particular photograph, those are bottlenose dolphins bow riding on the wave that this whale is creating as it swims through the water. Here's another animal that comes to mind when we think of whales. This is a humpback whale. In fact, it's three humpback whales. This photo from a drone shows these three animals blowing bubbles as they swim in ever tightening circles to herd small fish into a tight school. Humpback whales, too, are also common off the US West Coast in the California Current. Especially for those of us in the US West Coast, when we think of whales, we often think of the gray whale. This mother calf pair is migrating along the West Coast from their breeding grounds in Baja California, Mexico, to their feeding grounds off of Oregon for a small population and on up to Alaska in the Bering, Beaufort, and Chukchi Seas for most of the population. Sperm whales are another animal that comes to mind when we think of whales. Sperm whales are deep divers feeding on squid. They are highly social with complex social patterns and lifespans paralleling humans. And when we think of whales, how can we not think of what may be the most recognizable large animal in the ocean, the killer whale? These are highly social, they're pack hunters, predators of all things that swim in the oceans. Killer whales, too, frequent waters in the California Current, including along our Oregon coast here. But there is an entire family of whales in the world's oceans that many have never even heard of, and few have even seen. These are known as the beaked whales, and they are all in an entire single family known as Ziphiidae. There are currently 23 species recognized in the beaked whale family. They are found in all oceans of the world at all latitudes. They're almost entirely found where the ocean is deep. And although small by whale standards, typically 15 to 40 feet long, they weigh up to 12 tons, and that places them among the largest 0.001% of all animals on Earth. And there's a reason they are best depicted as a group with this series of drawings. Of all the marine mammals, this is by far the most poorly known group. What I want to do now is tell you a little bit about what we do know about them. Beaked whales are what we call extreme divers. They dive for long periods of time and they dive to extreme depths. This particular animal in this photograph is known as Cuvier's beaked whale, goose-beaked whale. By placing satellite tags on them, we know that they dive to almost 3,000 meters. That's just under 10,000 feet, equivalent to an 800-story building, or about 7 Empire State Buildings tall. During these deep dives, they can remain underwater for over 2 hours. Deep dives for long periods of time are characteristic of all beaked whales. So why do they dive so deep? This is the answer. Their favorite food is squid, and squid are extremely abundant deep below the ocean surface. At these depths, there's no light at all. These whales feed in complete darkness. They locate their prey not using vision, but using echolocation, producing sounds and listening to echoes as the sound waves reflect off of objects in the water, and that includes squid. All beaked whales have extremely well-developed echolocation capabilities, and during their dives, they produce echolocation clicks constantly. But when they come to the surface, they are silent, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Beaked whales have bizarre teeth. This is Blainville's beaked whale. This animal is swimming to the left. You can see its upper and lower jaws at the far left. They form what we call a beak. Near the center of this photo are 2 protuberances. Those are this animal's teeth. There's only 1 tooth on each side of the head, and both of those teeth erupt from the lower jaw, which in this particular species forms an arch that you can see reaches above the top of the skull. Most beaked whales have this peculiar dentition, only two teeth and only in the lower jaw, one on each side. Every species of beaked whale has teeth that are different from any other species. And these are drawings of the lower jaw of 7 species of beaked whale on the right, and on the left, the top view of a typical beaked whale skull. Here, you can clearly see that the size, shape, and placement of the teeth in the lower jaw are different. What do they use these teeth for? Well, it's not for feeding. Only adult males have teeth. Females remain toothless for their entire lives. The males use these teeth to fight each other for access to breeding females. Now, I'll tell you, these battles have never been witnessed, but we know they must be fierce because when jousting males rake each other with their teeth, they can sometimes leave deep, bleeding furrows along each other's bodies. I'll show you an example in a minute. This is a young male Blainville's beaked whale. Its teeth have not yet erupted from the lower jaw, but the parallel rake marks that you can see on its body here, those rake marks were made by another male scraping its teeth against this one. And by the way, those polka dots that you see, those are scars left by cookie cutter sharks. And that's a story for a different time. This is what an older male beaked whale looks like. And as you can see, he has a lot of battle scars. And this male is covered with rake marks and deep furrowed scars from extremely aggressive encounters with other males. That's the left tooth that points up above the skull. And you can see that the right tooth is broken, probably from combat with another male. This is strap-toothed beaked whale. The teeth of males in this species grow over the top of the upper jaw so that the mouth cannot open more than about an inch. The tooth that I'm holding in the photo on the right shows the sharp denticle at the top that is used to gouge other males. Truly bizarre teeth. When beaked whales surface to breathe, they stop vocalizing. And instead of coming straight up to the surface, they veer off in random directions. When they get to the surface, they take a few quick gulps of air and then they dive for 10 minutes or so before surfacing again. They do this several times before their next deep foraging dive. So, why this erratic and silent surfacing? The answer is because beaked whales are vulnerable to killer whales. There are photos of killer whales attacking, killing, and eating beaked whales at the surface. This animal that you see here in this photo is Baird's beaked whale. And this enlargement shows tooth rake scars on its dorsal fin. Those scars were left by an attacking killer whale. This particular Baird's beaked whale got away, but lots of beaked whales have killer whale tooth rake marks on them. And so it's little wonder that beaked whales are wary of their time at the surface when they are so vulnerable. So all of these factors, their oceanic distribution, the fact that they are found in small group sizes, their deep and long dives, their silent and evasive behavior at the surface, all of those factors are common to beaked whales, and they combine to make beaked whales the most poorly known family of all whales. In fact, they're the most poorly known family of all marine mammals. Of the 23 known species of beaked whales, 5 have been discovered and described to science since the mid 1960s. And 6 of these beaked whale species have never been identified alive in the sea. They are known only from animals found on the beach. And one or more could live in waters of the California Current along the US West Coast. So, with this in mind, we put together an expedition with hopes to provide essential information to better understand beaked whales in the California Current. For we cannot conserve what we don't know. This expedition had 12 individuals. 8 of us were scientists and 4 were crew. We intended to set sail from Newport here in Oregon for 30 days at sea aboard the Pacific Storm. This vessel was built as a commercial trawler, donated to our Marine Mammal Institute by her owner, and refitted as a research vessel. And you can see here we are sailing out underneath the Yaquina Bay Bridge under blue skies and complete calm into the big Pacific Ocean. Aboard, we had 2 critical, what I will call science powers, along with the world's best scientists in these 2 fields. Our first scientific power was the ability to listen to the ocean with an explicit focus on beaked whales. So this is Anna Maria at our Acoustics Control Center. She is listening to underwater sounds in real time that are detected by a long cable containing underwater microphones, and we call those hydrophones, that are towed behind our research vessel, the Pacific Storm. We use a variety of software tools to visualize these sounds because our human sense of vision is so much better than our sense of hearing, quite unlike the beaked whales that we were looking for. This is what Anna Maria is concentrating on. The top panel in this figure shows echolocation clicks detected by our hydrophone. These clicks scroll across the screen in real time, and Anna Maria can click her mouse on any of these dots to produce the plots below. These plots below provide details about the animal that produced them. Beaked whale clicks have a unique shape that you can see in the plot with the green background. The 2 plots to the left of the green one help us determine what species is making this click. More on this in a minute. Let me tell you now about our second key science power, and that is these 25 by 150 high-powered binoculars. We mounted them on the crow's nest of the Pacific Storm and used them to search the ocean all around us for beaked whales out to the horizon from sunup to sundown, weather permitting. And you can see in this photo, the weather was indeed mighty fine. So our goal on this expedition was to link the distinctive vocalizations that we were hearing from animals below the surface with the appearance of the animals once they came to the surface to breathe. And in order to identify the species visually, remember, we needed to see the teeth of an adult male. It's those teeth that are distinctive to species, but if we see females without the teeth, we're unable to identify the species. So it was September 22nd. We were 200 nautical miles to sea west of the Columbia River mouth, right at the border of Oregon and Washington. Anna Maria and Daniel, that you see in this slide, were monitoring the sounds coming in from our hydrophone. Our software was translating the inaudible ultrasonic signals into visual representations when the computer screen showed a type of beaked whale signal that neither had ever seen before. Just 3 minutes later, this mystery whale stopped vocalizing, and we knew exactly what that meant. It meant that the whale would soon be coming to the surface. We immediately slowed the vessel and sent all of the scientists and all of the crew, but one acoustician and the captain driving the ship to search for the whale in waters all around the ship with handheld binoculars, the big eyes, and unaided eye. Most unfortunately, on this particular day, we had very high winds and heavy seas, poor sighting conditions, with only a faint hope of finding the whale before its next dive. We stayed in that spot, all of us above on the weather decks, looking desperately for whales. We stayed there for an hour and a half. Then we saw this. In the poor conditions, Todd, Craig, and Bob had their long lenses on their cameras. Their motor drives were firing at full speed. Jay was on deck taking this video. We knew that at any moment the whales could dive or we would lose them behind a wave or in the sun glare. Any moment could be our last sight. Then, to our amazement, they came over to the ship. There were a pair of them, and repeatedly they approached the ship, following in our quarter wake, swimming in front of the bow along either side of us. They were about 15 feet long, with spindle-shaped bodies and a relatively straight jawline. The dorsal fin was falcate and wide-based, low and triangular. They were medium gray with some mottling. There was no distinctive color pattern around the face. In total, we spent just over 40 minutes with them at the surface. We got fantastic looks, thousands of photos, and this great video footage. Here are some still photos of these animals. You can see the water droplets associated with the blow of this animal as it surfaces. Here is the head, the beak, the jawline. Here's the dorsal fin and some mottling on the skin. And here's the eye just above the waterline. The dimple in the top of the head where the blowhole is, some yellow colored patches of diatoms growing on the skin. And as we were intensely watching the whales, at times, frankly, it seemed that they were intensely watching us. But despite their inquisitive behavior, despite these close approaches, and the fact that we had the world's best beaked whale authorities on board as part of our science team, despite all this, we were unable to determine what species they were. And the reason is because they were subadults. Remember that if they are not adult males, most beaked whales all look pretty much the same. However, our expedition team does not give up easily. And standing on the bow with crossbow in hand, Bob took aim and fired a 2-foot-long lightweight dart at one of the whales. Here you can see that dart on its way toward the target, which is the upper back of the animal just in front of the dorsal fin. By the way, the red wound that you see on this animal, that's a relatively fresh cookie cutter shark bite. Now, Bob has collected thousands of these samples from all kinds of whales, dolphins, and porpoises around the planet. And this particular dart, this dart hit its mark. And here you can see it just before it landed in the water. That tiny pink bit at the tip of the dart, that's a pencil eraser sized piece of skin and blubber of our mystery whale. The DNA contained in that biopsy sample held the key to this species identification. We were at sea for just one more day. Then we returned to Newport, Oregon, unpacked the Pacific Storm, and all the science party returned to our respective homes and workplaces across the country. But the science continued. The first thing we took from the Pacific storm was that biopsy sample. It went straight to our Cetacean Conservation and Genomics Laboratory here at the Marine Mammal Institute. And Scott Baker and Debbie Steele immediately went to work. 5 days later, we had our answer. Our mystery beaked whale was Hubb's beaked whale, the Latin name Mesoplodon carl hubbsi. And our biopsied whale was a female. So let me take a moment to put this into perspective. In 1945, a preeminent American ichthyologist described a beaked whale that was found alive in the surf near his office in La Jolla, California. The skull and color pattern of that animal were different from any whale known to science, and that whale ultimately became recognized as a new species, Hubb's beaked whale. But for the next 50 years, it would be known only from specimens found dead on beaches. Fast forward to 1994, the NOAA Research Vessel Surveyor was conducting a marine mammal survey off the coast of Oregon when the science team that included Robert Pittman, who was a part of our expedition, the same Bob who collected our biopsy sample, Robert Pittman spotted a group of Hubb's beaked whales that included an adult male. That was the first and only time Hubb's beaked whale had ever been identified alive. And it would not be identified alive again until our project. Meanwhile, acousticians were busy listening to the oceans and recording beaked whale signals. One of those signals was a distinctive and unique call named BW37V. It was published in a paper in 2019. No one knew what animal produced that call, and that was until the day of our extraordinary encounter with that pair of mystery beaked whales, when our acoustics team recorded that call again. And it was the biopsy sample that linked that call with Hubb's beaked whale. And instantly, we knew a lot more about this rare whale. What you see in this map is the locations, the red and yellow shapes, where this call has been recorded. And we now know that Hubb's beaked whale is not so rare after all. It occurs throughout US waters of the California Current, and it does not occur in the central or western Pacific, where acousticians have also listened for beaked whales. So I'll pause here to tell you that science often, in fact, most often, is part serendipity. I have not told you that our initial goal for our expedition was to reach the infamous garbage patch in the Eastern Pacific Gyre. That's way, way far into the vast Pacific. We wanted to get out there because of accounts of mystery beaked whales. But engine transmission problems forced us to return to Newport early. Our incredibly skilled crew were able to complete repairs in short order, and we used our remaining sea time just to explore the offshore waters of Oregon. It turns out that we solved a mystery in our own backyard, although perhaps only oceanographers and fishermen would consider 200 miles at sea to be our backyard. But it's this adversity, challenge, risk, camaraderie, and occasionally extraordinary discovery. That's really why I became a marine scientist. This research was a collaboration between the Marine Mammal Institute of Oregon State University and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And a special acknowledgement to all the residents of Oregon that have these license plates. They show a beautiful piece of art representing a gray whale female and her calf. And for each of these license plates sold or renewed, our Marine Mammal Institute receives $35 to support our research, education, and outreach.
Hmm.
This beaked whale expedition was supported in part by these funds, and without them, our research simply would not have been possible. So, our beaked whale expedition was a fantastic success, an awesome example of local research with what I will call global impact. And by the way, those whales that have never been seen alive in the wild, well, they are still out there. And I'm relatively recently returned from another expedition aboard our research vessel offshore of northern Baja California, Mexico this time. And we found one of them, a ginkgo tooth beaked whale. But that's a story for another time. So I want to end here, take questions if there is time, and thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you all about this evening.
Thanks so much, Lisa. What a cool talk. Now I want to ask you to come back and give us a talk about ginkgo whales. Today, I have a few questions. Given that we're about to, and anybody who has questions, please contribute to the meeting chat or raise your hand, and we've got about 15 minutes that we can spend getting the information that we would dearly love to know from Lisa here. I wonder, we're about to articulate this beaked whale down here, and what questions do you, as a scientist, think we should be asking about the skeleton? What are the questions you would be wanting to solve through putting together this articulation, this skeleton? What would you be thinking about? And also, what are some interesting questions that, to you, most interesting questions that you have about Hub's beaked whales? What are your mysteries that keep you up at night?
Okay, well, I'm actually going to have to turn the tables here because I'm extremely curious about your specimen, your whale. Um, how did you get it? Is it an adult? If it's an adult, is it a male? Maybe you could tell me and everybody else a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. We've got Sarah Grimes and we have Sheila Siemens here. And since they're the ones that have actually laid their hands on this organism, along with, I know Anna's on, and there's a few others also. So I'd love to let them tell any information there.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Lisa. That was super fascinating and so exciting to see the visual of that whale because immediately I was like, oh my gosh, she looks just like our whale. And on May 16th, 2022, Marine Mammal Center called our volunteers. Anna Antonovich went out and people were saying, is it a fish? Is it a dolphin? What is this? And I got out there and of course was equally baffled. What is this? But we immediately started taking measurements and responding and determined that she was 390 centimeters long, a female. We could see ribs, so we think thin, but then they are quite streamlined. Um, and we were able to collect the entire skeleton. So that is how we came to have this precious skeleton. She's all clean and we will articulate her. And interestingly, female, she did have two teeth, but apparently they would never have erupted. So that's something that we could learn by looking at the bones of this animal. Yeah, so that's kind of how we came to have her, and she's precious and beautiful. And what a mysterious animal to have washed up here on the northern, on the Mendocino coast. And we didn't know, I thought it was something and we talked about it and actually photographs went right round the world. And finally a researcher in Poland said, aha, that's Carl Hubsey. And then the DNA as well was sent out to confirm that. But young female is what I understand her to be. And she had the cookie cutter shark marks on her. And what I thought maybe were ulcers in her necropsy they did see some internal ulcers in that whole report. So we will be diving deep in and learning a whole bunch more as we all come together around the skeleton. So
Super wonderful. It's just such a fascinating opportunity. I mean, I think for me, the skeletons of cetaceans in general are absolutely fascinating because they tell such an amazing evolutionary story. Um, but yeah, the skeletons of beaked whales are particularly valuable because they are so rare. So yeah, I'm gonna have to get down and see that
please
girl
do.
once you get her articulated.
Yeah, come join us. Like, it is just so wonderful to have the alive version talked about and seen, and those pictures are phenomenal. Just so exciting. I was practically in tears.
Our partners are joining us from Cal Academy, and who else? We've got a bunch of people converging here at the Noyo Center. Who else is joining us to partner with us on this?
Yeah, Cal Academy, and then a lot of our volunteers, our staff coming together. And last night we had an amazing surprise visit from Mike DeRuse from Cetacea, who helped us put together our killer whale. So our little skeleton is slightly broken up. She was tossed around in the rocks quite a bit during the 2 days that she got moved from beach to beach. But Mike stopped in, he's sailing the coast, and he stopped in and helped us put these ribs together. So that was like a superstar showing up in our midst, and we played with, putting these ribs together that I've been puzzling and headaching over. Broken ribs, some are broken into 3 pieces, so it's like puzzling that, but he's magical, and like this mysterious person sailed in and helped us put that together. So he is part of that team. Yeah, a lot of us that responded to her on the beach will be involved in this, and sharing photos of that first day. And yeah,
What I want.
gonna be incredible. Anybody else who is on that response? I know Leah, our staff, Richard, there was a bunch of us, Sarah Sundberg, but Anna Antanovich was the first down there, and she's got some beautiful photos from that first sighting. Yeah, I'll let others chime in, and I'll be quiet.
Yeah, so Lisa, what questions would you be asking about this whale as you went along? We have our questions, but we would love to know, what would you be thinking about?
Well, I think I'm I have a lot of questions about Hub's beaked whale in general. I mean, we do know a lot now about its distribution, mostly because we know what its call type is, and therefore wherever we hear the call, that's where we see Hub's beaked whale. But there's a lot. I mean, that's about all we know about it, actually. Um, so I have just an infinite number of questions about the social structure, um, migratory patterns, if there are some, and there that's what cookie cutter sharks tell us about whales and dolphins. If you see them in higher latitudes, cookie cutter sharks are tropical animals. So any animal, any marine animal with a cookie cutter shark bite, you know that it spends some time in the tropics, including these Hub's beaked whales that occur in temperate latitudes where there aren't any. But why do they make those migrations, if they are migrations, or are they just generalized movement patterns? Um, yeah, social structure for most beaked whales is assumed based on what little we know about the small group sizes and the fact that only the males have teeth. There are some exceptions of beaked whales there, but most species of beaked whales, it's only the males. Um, so we know they battle. We assume for females, but we've never seen those battles. I could keep on going just because essentially there's so little known, which means everything is unknown.
So
So it's
we've
kind of fun, I guess I would say, to make this kind of a discovery and to talk about this kind of thing in today's ocean, where it's it tends to be dominated by conservation challenges, anthropogenic impacts on oceans, and how do we mitigate those impacts. It's nice to tell a story of discovery and wonder, and it's, you must be super excited to have one of the very, very few specimens of Hub's beaked whale, and to be able to have a complete skeleton and articulate it.
Oh, we are. We are. It's a very, very rare specimen, and we've got a blue whale that we've been taking care of the bones for since 2009, and we're just about to break ground on a building that's going to give us the space we need to begin to raise the funds to articulate that as well. So hopefully we'll be able to do more and more as our team has been working hard, responding to marine mammals and putting the skeletons together and assisting and supporting Cal Academy and other institutes as well. So yeah, I mean, you've got to come down and see it, and we would love to have you and have a science social during your visit. So I've got a question from Peggy here, who asks, how do you tell the difference between rake marks from killer whales and other beaked whales?
That's a great question. So the answer is beaked whales the males only have two teeth, one in either side of the lower jaw, and therefore when they scrape each other, you'll have two parallel rake marks. Killer whales have multiple teeth in their jaws, and when killer whales scrape an animal, you see multiple parallel rake marks. So it's just the number of parallel rake marks on the animal.
So, when those whales were by your boat, how long did you say that they were spending time with you?
We spent about 40 minutes with them, and this is another quite bizarre thing about these animals. Beaked whales are generally thought to be shy of vessels. As I said in the beginning of the talk, they they come to the surface and they're quiet, they're erratic. We think that that behavior is associated with their vulnerability to killer whales. There's a place in southern Australia where killer whales regularly aggregate to feed on beaked whales, and they're quite helpless at the surface. They're not fast swimmers, and if they get and killer whales, being pack hunters that they are, they're very effective at killing beaked whales. Uh, so we have generalized beaked whale shy behavior around vessels accordingly, but these whales were absolutely not shy around us, this pair of whales. The conditions were poor enough so that I honestly don't think we would have seen them had they not come up to us. So we first saw them in the quarter wake behind the vessel. They were just swimming along with us. Repeatedly during that 40 minutes, we lost sight of them. And when we thought that the sighting was over, there they would be again. So they were clearly staying with the vessel. I mentioned that we had intended to get to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The same thing happened with a scientific group that was out there to study the garbage itself, to think about how we might mitigate that garbage, what might we do about it. And a beaked whale came up to that boat. They got a photograph of it and sent it to my colleague Bob Pittman, who's one of the world's authorities in beaked whales, and he didn't know what that was either. That's why we were trying to go out there. But the point is that that whale was curious about that animal. And then finally, I mentioned this June expedition that I was on where we found ginkgo-toothed beaked whale for the first time. And we had a pair of those that were curious to our vessel. So I don't know what that means. Is this a new behavior for beaked whales? Or are we on the water now frequently enough so that we're starting to discover that not all beaked whales are so shy? Anyway, it's just another one of those mysteries.
So Sarah Grimes is asking some great questions, and I know that she has been thinking and thinking about this. Sarah, did you want me to read your questions, or do you want to just go ahead and ask? Because I know you have some wonderful questions.
Well, I know there's a lot of really smart people on this call, so and we could discuss and have fun for another hour or more. But yeah, I'm just curious. I noticed her throat pleats in photos as I was reviewing them today. And then I just have, you know, a really difficult time visualizing how they're feeding. And of course, that's going to remain a mystery because we can't get down where they're feeding. Um, and then also just can the human ear pick up those clicks with a hydrophone, or is that just what you're seeing on the screen?
Yeah. Okay, I'll take the second one first. We have to slow those sounds down greatly before the human ear can pick them up. And I've given this talk on occasion. I'll actually play some of those clicks of beaked whales. I've not played the BW37B, the Hub's beaked whale call, but no, we can't hear them unless we greatly slow them down, which is again a reason why our acousticians use visual characteristics of the calls rather than acoustic characteristics, because our hearing is so much less well developed. Um, Back to your first question about the throat pleats. Great question. So all beaked whales have two grooves in their throat. They're called gular grooves. And you might be more familiar with these in baleen whales. Baleen whales tend to have throat pleats, they're gular grooves. And the function of those is that they allow the throat to expand when the animal is feeding. So they act just like an accordion. If you imagine an accordion, you pull it out, and it's pleated, and when you pull it out, the accordion expands in size. If you're a whale and you feed on small schooling fishes or small schooling invertebrates, you take a gulp of water, and that's how you get your prey. You're going to get more prey if you can get more water in your mouth. And that's what those throat pleats are all about. They just allow the gular area to expand. So, what's up with the beaked whales? They all have these two gular grooves. And the thought is that when they're down feeding in complete darkness, they must be, and because they echolocate constantly when they're down below feeding, foraging, they use the echolocation to locate the prey. The thought is that they use those gular grooves to, they expand their gular grooves with their mouth open, and it creates a suction, and that pulls the squid into their mouth. It sounds weird, but they are weird animals. And this idea first was developed in association with that bizarre animal that I showed you, the strap-toothed beaked whale that has the two teeth that come up and curve over the upper jaw. So the male can only open its mouth at the apex of the beak by an inch or two. And the thought is, well, how do they feed if they can't even open their mouth? And it's that suction that we think is the answer. And the gular grooves, because all beaked whales have it, that's what we think is going on. So that's what we think is the function of those gular grooves. Pretty
That's
bizarre.
fascinating. So, following on that, someone asked, do they expel water the way baleen's whales do then?
Um, well, of course, so baleen whales, the way they get rid of the water is they close their mouth, but they very slowly let the water out all around their mouth, in between the baleen plates, and the prey are caught in the baleen. Um, Beaked whales don't have baleen, obviously. They just have those two teeth, and I no one knows the answer to this question, so I'll just preface that this way. But because the purpose of the suction and bringing the water in is to bring the squid in, then they've got the squid. They don't need to be careful about expelling the water. They just let it back out of their mouths. Is the idea?
All right. Well, one more great question from Sarah Sundberg, the right hand of Sarah Grimes in the stranding team. They're an army, but these two are the ones that are scrubbing the bones and hauling it up more than anybody. So Sarah asks, just curious if you guys heard and collected sounded, if the just curious if the hydrophone recordings you guys heard and collected sounded or looked like any other echolocating cetacean, or are they completely different?
Yes. So the calls of beaked whales tend to, as we're continuing to learn about them, but it turns out that there are species specific calls. So that's the power of linking the visual sighting, or in this case, the genetics that confirmed what this animal was, with that call. Because acousticians are recording these calls all the time. And in quite a few cases, they describe the call scientifically and they publish on the call without knowing what animal is producing it. But that they are species specific calls means that once you identify what makes that call, you immediately know a lot more about the animal. So the short answer to that question is yes. As far as we know, all beaked whales do have species specific calls, much like all odontocetes do as well, species specific calls, and then maybe some variation of those calls depending on what the population structure is. But we know a lot less about that.
All right. Well, one last question. This is from Sarah Bogard, do their tongues play a part in feeding?
No one knows. Um, Almost certainly yes. And I think I'm just gonna stop there because it gets pretty speculative.
Okay, well, Sheila Siemens, our executive director, has raised her hand, so we'll let Sheila
Yeah,
get.
so even though you said one last question, I have one last question. So Lisa, thank you so much because it's really great to hear about their life and their life history. So when we think about the pose of these animals, um, we have more context. And so being one of the few, so when we're thinking about the pose of our articulation, a diving pose makes sense because they're deep divers, right? But being one of the few people that spent so much time seeing them in the world, any other pose ideas come to mind for you? Like having watched them at the surface of and watch their curiosity. Do you have any other thoughts about pose ideas?
Yeah, that is a great question. And um, I love articulated skeletons that are a little bit more dynamic. They breathe some life into the animal rather than just a static, straight animal.
Right.
So it's a great question. And what I will tell you is that beaked whales are not nearly as flexible in life as, let's say, a dolphin. So you can imagine a dolphin coming to the surface. It's a smaller animal. They are a lot bendier, I guess, when they're surfacing and diving.
Yeah.
Beaked whales are not so bendy.
Right.
They're a lot stiffer, but they definitely. I love your idea of trying to breathe life into the animal through
Right.
the pose, and I would tell you that perhaps, well, a diving pose would be great, so that it's looking like it's going down, and the animal, you don't want to make it too bendy because beaked whales are just not bendy. But if you could have it going down and then maybe just turning a little bit on its side, for example, it just breathes some life into it. I
Oh
think
my
that
God,
would
that's exactly where we landed yesterday. Like just a slight twist because we're thinking about it having to, look for those squid or whatever, but but mostly down with just a little bit of a twist to also hide because we have one side of the ribs that are pretty broken and we're going to be using 3D printed ribs.
oh,
But
good.
also trying to sort of hide a little bit of that in the pose itself. But yeah, because they are so much just this incredibly long vertebral column. That
Yes.
that might add some interest to it. Okay, well, great. Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Such a great way to kick off our conversations that we'll continue to have all next week. And
Well, good luck with it. It sounds like a super exciting
It
project.
true
yeah,
science in action, just like your field experience was just your ultimate field survey. It's we don't have this pristine beaked whale. We have a very mysterious specimen with missing pieces, and we're going to start the week just talking about science and how science explores questions and what a skeleton can teach us and why articulation matters. And our doors will be open every day to 1 to 4, and then we'll have a very cool science social on Thursday evening, on Saturday. We're not going to have a big ta-da, now it's a beautiful specimen. It's never going to be beautiful like our orca, but it's going to answer so many questions, and it's not just going to answer questions, but it's going to take us to the next set of questions. So we start with these about the most mysterious of the most mysterious, and as we move through the week, we'll have more advanced set. So by the time you come down, we're going to be loaded up with questions for you.
Okay, I can't wait.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. And it was just great. We had about 50 people on today. A lot of them had some experience with this beaked whale, and I hope you all come through and spend some time with us at the center. And being a part of these articulation workshops is one of the most special things that we get to do. So I'm very grateful all of you are here. If you're able to support the Noyo with a donation, we're very, very grateful. And please come and spend time with us next week. And Lisa, please come down and visit us. We would love to host you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the invitation. Best of luck, and I'll make it a point to get down there.
Excellent. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.